welcome to Christ Church. My name is Allison and I'm one of the pastors on staff here. We're so glad that you've decided to join us today. Whether you're joining us in the room or you're joining us online, we're so glad to have you a part of our community today. We would love the opportunity to connect with you. Getting connected at Christ Church is really easy. We try really hard to keep it simple and to make it simple so that this can feel like home for you just as quickly as possible. So whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been coming for years and years, we would love the opportunity to connect with you and help you get connected here at Christ Church. So there's a couple ways to do that. One way is to fill out our online connection card. This is for you in the room or those of you joining us online. All you have to do is scan the QR code below. That will take you straight to our online connection card where you can fill that out, get information about what your next steps are, and get connected at Christ Church. The second way is a little more personal. If you're here in the room joining us, and again, if you're new or just ready to get connected, we'd love for you to join us immediately following the service down the hall to the right in Connection Point. There's a tremendous group of people down there waiting to connect with you in something that we call 10 After. In less than 10 minutes, we'll tell you exactly how to plug in at Christ Church. If you have kids with you today, leave those back there in our kids ministry. They'll take tremendous care of them. But just give us 10 minutes, and in less than that time, we'll give you your next steps. We'll tell you how to plug in here at Christ Church. We're so glad that you're here today. If you came prepared to partner with us in generosity, we would love for you to do that. It's really simple. You can do it online. That's the easiest way, is to kind of automate that and do it online. But if you're here in the room and you'd like to give that way, our ushers will receive that on the way out the door today as you exit. But however you partner with us in generosity, we want you to know that there are amazing things going on around here every day. We're watching people get baptized. We're sending teenagers to camp. We're hosting a local camp for elementary and middle school kids here right on our campus. We're watching our Hope 1312 ministry meet real physical needs in our Department of Family and Children Services child welfare system. Like everywhere we look, we are just watching God show up in and through Christ Church, and we are so grateful that you're a part of that. So we're so glad that you're here today. We hope you enjoy your service. We hope that you feel the presence of God in this place, and we're happy to have you part of our community.
Good morning, Christ Church. Please stand and worship with us this morning. We're going to start with a song most of us know. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise, treasures that fade, never enough. You came along, put me back together.
worship you. I pray that you would just speak to us, you would open up our hearts and our ears to be able to receive what it is that you have for us today, to hear your voice clearly. And we pray, Jesus, amen.
Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Everybody good? Good to see you guys today. Wow, glad you guys are here today. My name's John. I'm one of the pastors, and just want to welcome you all here today. And those of you who are watching online, we don't forget about you as well. So thank you guys for spending part of your Sunday here with us. Two things real fast before we jump in today. Next Sunday is Father's Day, if you don't have that on your radar. And what's happening next Sunday is we will have guests here who are coming in to help with Connect Camp. So Connect Camp is a camp we're hosting that begins next Monday, but we will have those guests here, a lot of college and young adult age people who are coming to execute the camp with us. And they're going to join us for worship, so they'll be here, and then they're going to be setting up later in the day. But in regards to camp, I know many of you are going to be serving. Thank you for doing that. Many of you gave scholarship money so kids could attend. But there's also just a few spots left where we could use you to serve. And that might be all day, but if that's not cool, then a couple of hours would be awesome. And you can just get info and indicate interest out there at that table in the lobby. The other thing about Father's Day is we will have throughout the morning outside food trucks. There's going to be a really big tent out there. And we are having a cornhole tournament, okay? And I'm not bitter about the fact that the last time we did this, I lost in the finals, but you know, it's a chance for redemption. But if you're a guy, you don't even need to be a father, just a guy, you can participate in that. And there's actually info at guest services today. You could actually sign up. You could actually choose a partner this time. Last time I think we assigned them, but oh, there's the winner right there, man. Look at you. But you can actually sign up out there and get into that. And if you're a single, we'll help you find somebody. So, all right, last week, can we go for it? You guys ready? Last week, we started a group of loosely connected messages, really by theme. And we used this theme in the bumper, inked. And it's not really about yes or no about tattoos or anything like that, but using that idea, and you know, this is a tattooed community, that usually there's a story there, right? Something happened in your life, it was significant, it was meaningful, there was an impact, so much so that you would be willing to have that thing mark your life forever. And we're just kind of using that as a metaphor to say essentially that there are some scriptures or Bible passages that have been that way for me, as well as some of our other people who are going to be teaching, and we're just going to kind of use it throughout the summer to say that there are some things, right, that have been so meaningful and significant that they have really marked our life. And I kicked it off last week with one from Proverbs 3. Today I'm going to do one from John chapter 8. And by the way, it's not a requirement that the person teaching actually carries this mark on their own body, okay? That's not what we're saying. In this case today, I actually do, and I'll tell you about that a bit later. But today I want to look at a crucial aspect of Jesus, like who he is and what he does that I missed for years, okay? So many years I missed this. And then I started to grasp it, and I'm still working on it. But it changed a lot for me. So John chapter 8, that's a story I want to hang out with today. Real quick though, 4 people write about the life of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew starts his with a list of family members of Jesus' life. Mark skips over all that birth stuff and goes straight to Jesus as an adult. Luke gives us some political and historical context of the birth of Jesus. And then John, who's a friend of Jesus and a follower of Jesus, starts all the way back at creation, and he tells us a little something about the fact that God was about to come to earth. And here's what John most wants us to notice about Jesus. This is way back in chapter 1, verse 14. But it says that the Word, which is a reference to Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us. Okay, so God in the flesh, Jesus, he's here, he's living among us. We have observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, and here's the phrase, full of grace and truth. Like, could we just do it together today? Say those last 5 words together, that last phrase right there, starting with the word full. Here we go. Full of. Awesome. I love that. Just say to your neighbor, grace and truth. Okay, less enthusiastic, but I get it. Jesus, he's full of grace and truth, right? Not 50-50. He's not half and half, right? It's the same idea of the Christian teaching as Jesus is fully God 100% and he's fully man 100% at the same time. He doesn't turn it off and on when he wants or if the situation, demands it. He's 100% grace, 100% truth. So get a container as big as Jesus and it's full of grace and truth, which is hard for us to grasp, really, when you think about it. It seems like those two things can't really go together, like they might be in conflict with one another. Like this fall, right, when we get ready for the big football game down in Jacksonville, and you were to say to somebody, hey, tell me, who's going to win the game today, and if someone says to you, you know what, I don't really care, I like the Bulldogs and I like the Gators, you would go, well, that's impossible. That just doesn't work that way, right? Those things are in conflict with one another. And it seems like that's the way it is with grace and truth. It seems that way because every one of us, I think for the most part, has a leaning in one direction or the other. And here's what I mean by that. How many of us played junior high sports, or we call it middle school now? All right, this is kind of the time when I explored all of them, so baseball, basketball, I stuck with it, but I tried football. And then, everybody played football in 8th grade, so I made the team. Then it was like during the president's physical fitness test. All right, you guys, we're still doing this, I believe. Remember the president's physical fitness test, and you do all these different things. And I actually ran a pretty fast, at the time, a 600 meter. And so at the urging of my gym teacher, I went out for junior high track. And part of the first week of practice was actually learning how to use the starting blocks. You know those things? And you're like, you get down in your stance and you put one foot behind the other and you want to push off. And because nobody had actually ever done this before, okay? The coach says, well, you just use your dominant leg to actually push off with. Well, we're in junior high, right? I don't know. I'm still working on coordination. I don't really know what my dominant leg is. So he has all of us line up in a line, and he decides to walk behind us. And while we're not really paying attention, he just pushed us all in the back, and we take a natural step forward. And then he comes back around in the front of the line, and he says, okay, well, how you stepped, right, when I pushed you, then that's the way you should stay in the starting blocks. I don't know if that's a scientific method or not, but, okay, I get down, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump off with the left foot. What it taught me, though, is that everybody leans, okay? And I think that that's true for the most part when it comes to grace and truth. So check out this graphic on the screen, and you can probably draw this on your notes if you wanted to and maybe fill in the blanks. But you got grace, okay, going all the way up the left side vertically, and you have truth going all the way across the bottom horizontally, and you can fill in the different things, right? So one there would be, I'm really low on grace and I'm really low on truth, okay? You're just a terrible person altogether, okay? You got nothing going on. But move up to the second one up there. You have high on grace, and then you're low on truth. That's the way that would be represented there, okay? That would be like the unofficial, like the pop culture stance, I guess, today. Acceptance, right? Full acceptance, no condemnation, and then that's basically condonement. Go down to 3, so I'm really high. I got a lot of truth, but I'm kind of low on grace, right? And that would be like the unofficial social media stance of the day for us, right? I speak my truth, typically without any relationship to anybody else whatsoever, and then I'm just leave a trail of bodies behind me. That's the way that one works there. Now, every once in a while, I end up in a counseling situation. Okay, I'm over in my office and got a couch and a couple of chairs, and I might end up in a counseling situation that turns into an intervention, if you can picture that. And I thought we were talking about something, and then all of a sudden the whole family comes in, and I'm supposed to mediate this thing, okay? And typically what happens if you'll have someone like sitting on the couch next to the person, the family member that we're all looking at, going, you're the reason we're all here, and they're putting their arm around them going, okay, it's okay, right? It's going to be all right. And then there's another person across the way sitting in the chair with their arms folded going, this is a complete waste of my time, because if he would just realize what he's doing and he's hurting all of his relationships and quit it, right? Over here, right, I hate that you're in this situation. And then over here we got, well, if you would do this, then you wouldn't be in that situation. right? We got the gracious person and we got the really truthful person. And sometimes truth and grace are such at odds with one another. I have literally texted another staff member these 5 words: come quick, bring your gun. So grace people, right? There's always a second chance. Truth people, if you do this, then you won't actually need a second chance. Right? You go to grace people when you've really messed up big in your life, and you go to truth people when you need someone to actually give you some good advice and some direction, right? Grace without truth, by the way, and we'll come back to it in the graphic in a second. Grace without truth, by the way, it lacks any kind of power, right? And it leads you to become an indifferent person. Truth, though, without any grace, that lacks compassion, and it actually pushes people away. So grace without truth, that's license, and truth without grace, that's judgment. There is this tendency, I think, for all of us to feel like we have to choose. That it can't be grace and truth, that it's actually grace or truth. And it goes like this, right? Grace people, because I'm saved, right, by grace, truth is optional. And maybe it doesn't actually matter what I do or what I don't do or how I choose to live my life, right? God is so loving and forgiving that truth sometimes doesn't even really matter anymore, or it doesn't matter enough to actually change my life. And sometimes we don't really care what Jesus actually says is a better way to live. Truth people on the other side are going, okay, well, this is what Jesus said is true, so you do this and you actually don't do that. And if you don't live your life by the truth all the time, Jesus will actually see through it, and he'll realize that you're a fake Christian, and you won't get any grace because you were never a true follower. It's grace for a lot of us, or truth. The other way, though, is what I want to look at in the top corner up there, which is the fourth one. That's the one that's modeled by Jesus up there. I'm high on grace, and I'm really high on truth. And we could say that those two things really act like the 2 strands of his DNA, right? That's his makeup. That's who he is. So that's kind of the foundation for the story I want to look at today. And the question that I really want us to ask is, okay, what does it actually look like to live there? Like to be full of grace and to actually be full of truth? Could we actually be a person who maybe doesn't, is 100% like Jesus, but we can get a little bit closer to it? Or better yet, and I want to spend some time on this at the end, what it look like for a church to actually live in this space? So he's full of grace and truth. And I think the order is significant, right? That Jesus, and you can read some of his other interactions, seems to have this pattern that he's going to lead with grace, and then he's going to follow with truth. So John chapter 8, here's the story. Verse 1, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he went to the temple, and all the people were coming to him. He sat down, and he began to teach them. So early morning, Jesus rolls into the temple, right, the center of Jewish life. There's probably a big feast going on. It's this football field-sized building. People are coming in, lots of people around. He sits down, which is like the official position, so that he's ready to talk. Verse 3, the scribes and the Pharisees, and every time you read about these people, right, in the Gospels, it should come with music, right, because something bad's about ready to happen, like, and it should, da-da-da-da, the scribes and the Pharisees. They brought a woman, did you like that, caught in adultery, and they're making her stand in the center. So if you know anything about Jesus, you're probably familiar with this group of people, right? The scribes and the Pharisees. They have the strictest observance to the Old Testament law. It's going to do it perfectly, right? And they would actually go out of their way to perhaps put someone else in jeopardy if it meant that they could actually trap Jesus. So they lead with truth. They don't know anything at all about grace. And essentially, the stance is, well, if you just followed the rules perfectly all the time, you wouldn't end up here. They bring in a woman who's been caught in the act of adultery. Now, by the way, how do you catch someone in the act? I'm just going to guess here, like the way that I see them do it on Cheaters, okay? You ever watch the show, okay? Identify the target. We follow the person, we put them under surveillance, you wait for them to actually commit the act. There's no grace there, by the way. Then you drag them out in front of the cameras for everybody to see what's happening. That's how I picture how this may have gone down, right? We go into the hotel room, we confirm that these are the people. I don't really want to think much more about that. Grab her, escort her out, bring her to Jesus. Who is where, by the way? He's at church, right? Teacher, verse 4, they said to him, this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery. Complete side note, we never read any more about the guy. That's for another day. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? And they asked this to trap him in order that they might have evidence to accuse him. So always interesting to me whenever people start quoting the Bible to Jesus. Okay, and he knows it. He's got the whole thing memorized, right? But Jesus, hey, you know it says don't commit adultery. And just so we're all clear, don't have sex with people that you're not married to. Okay? Hey, Jesus, we know what it says in the law, right? The law, right? The 10 Commandments, the big 10, right? That later gets expanded to a whole bunch of others. What they're saying is actually true. And the penalty for adultery was stoning to death. It was a rough time, okay? And so actually today it's not even just a sin, but you go to certain countries in the Middle East and it's actually a crime. What happened back then though was that the stoning to death of certain people, it reinforced the idea that the penalty for sin was death. In this case, what Jesus is communicating, or what the law communicates in this situation is, hey, that's serious because you blew up your marriage or you blew up someone else's marriage. In this case, it's a trick question. Jesus, hey, should we stone her? Now, if Jesus says no, then he actually proves to everybody that maybe he doesn't really follow God's ways. If Jesus says yes, then maybe he shows he's just cold and heartless. So they're looking to Jesus not because they really care what he thinks, but because they're technically, and they know it, they're right. Verse 6. So Jesus stooped down and he started writing on the ground with his finger. When they persisted in questioning him, he stood up and he said to them, "The one without sin among you should be the first to throw a stone at her." And then he stooped down again and he continued writing on the ground. Now, these are the kinds of things I think about a lot. Like who's in the picture and what's happening, okay? All right, I believe we're still at church. There's a big crowd of people who are watching all this happen. You've got Jesus down here writing something in the dirt and kind of looking up at these guys. You got this woman standing here, I'm just going to take a wild guess, in a sheet, and then you have all these guys who have carried her in here, right, who are looking down on her. That's the scene. And I always wonder, like, what is Jesus writing down there? So, I don't know, maybe it's the sins of all the people who are standing there, okay? Maybe it's like the names of the people who should also be stoned to death, right? Frank, spring break, Sea of Galilee, 22 AD, right? Remember that one? Because it's true, right? Like biblically, like legally, she's guilty. Okay, let's kill her, right? But are those the rules that you really want to play by? Fine, we're just going to work our way down this line. We're going to start down here with Frank, and we're going to go all the way down the line, and we'll just kind of run everybody through the filter. So then anyone who doesn't have any sins in your life, just fire away, okay? When they heard this, they left one by one, starting with the older men, which I think is no insignificant detail, okay? We assume as we get older, guys, we also get wiser, right? Hey, wait a second. The smart ones leave. I mean, but why do they go home, though? Because, you know, they had truth on their side. Like, they thought that they could stand in the jury, and it was actually, they thought, their right to attack other people. But they reached this point where they go, okay, maybe we don't actually want to play by those rules. Verse 9, only he, so Jesus, was left with the woman in the center. So, okay, we're still standing here, wrapped in a sheet. Jesus, naked lady, where? I think in church, okay? I've had a lot of crazy things happen in church before. That's not one of them. When Jesus stood up, he said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She says, "No one, Lord." Okay, now listen. You could end the whole story right here, okay? And the takeaway would be, hey, nobody's perfect, so don't throw stones. I mean, you could have the takeaway be, hey, nobody is actually qualified, right? Nobody has the right to actually say to anybody else that what you're doing is wrong and you shouldn't sleep with people you're not married to. That's not how it ends. Okay, crowd is gone. We got Jesus and woman, and I assume what's left of the church folks. That's just how I read the whole thing, right? Which means you have mothers like covering kids' eyes and going, you know, of all the things I thought we'd never have to deal with at church, this is it. Verse 11, Jesus, neither then do I condemn you. In other words, okay, where's the jury, right? No one? Hey, listen, I don't condemn you either. Although I could, don't miss that. I could, I'm not going to. See, there is someone in this whole story right here who's actually qualified to pick up and throw a stone. One person who's actually qualified to judge, and he chooses not to. That's called grace. But, listen, this is how it ends. One more thing. Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore. Hey, I'm not doing that, what they wanted to have happen. I'm not going to do that, right? But here's what I will say to you. You have to stop living like this. What Jesus does is he leads with grace, and then he points her to truth, right? However that is. Break off the relationship, right? You're hurting another family. I know it seems like everything is okay, but you're really hurting yourself. Stop doing this if you want the best life, because there's so much more for you. By the way, just a side note for some of you, changing your life is not a prerequisite to be standing in the presence of Jesus. Right? You don't change all the bad stuff that you brought with you to get Jesus to like you. Here's how it begins. I like you. I love you. Someday soon, I'm actually going to die for you. I don't actually condemn you. But, look, he doesn't wink at her and say, you know what? It's okay. Those guys are jerks anyway. Had to run in with him last week. He doesn't say, you know, I know what you mean. That's so Old Testament. He doesn't say, I wish you wouldn't, but kids will be kids. He doesn't say, I love you, now get on out of here. And he doesn't say, hey, everyone just give her a break. Everybody makes mistakes, don't they? He does say, I love you, you can be forgiven, but this has to stop. See, when you really understand grace like that right there, it compels you to live differently. Like any concept that we formulate about grace that makes us more comfortable with continuing to sin, that's not grace. Grace isn't the opportunity for me to keep doing what I'm doing and living how I want. It's actually the power that actually helps me say no to the way I've been living and yes to Jesus. Grace never ignores truth. If anything, it highlights it. Right? When Jesus gave grace, many times what he followed that with was actually raising the bar on truth. But these guys, right, all these guys who were standing down here, they missed exactly what Jesus fully understood. Grace is the setup for truth. And if you're going to write any notes down or you go, oh, I should remember that, you should remember this, that the more grace that you give in your life, the more truth you can tell. It's Jesus. I'm not going to shame you. You're going to live. It's going to be okay, but you got to stop this. You got to change your ways. See, the grace is that he loves us and he forgives us. The truth is, hey, this over here can lead you to a better life. Grace, I love you. Truth, you got to live better. And this is where I would say I probably used to stop teaching the passage. I would say, okay, that's cool. Like Jesus is going, okay, hey, you're off the hook and live better. Whatever that means, I hope you figure it out, right? And then they part ways. Now, I read it differently this last week because, again, if I'm right, I admit to you sometimes I'm not, but I think I'm right about this. Jesus is teaching in the temple, right? And we have this interruption. So there's this whole scene that's just taken place. Well, just because we have a naked woman standing down in front of the church doesn't mean that the service is over. Because look at what comes next, okay, verse 12. Jesus spoke to them, which I assume is the church crowd. I am the light of the world, right? Anyone who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So here's how I picture that whole thing going down. Okay, so now what? Stop what you're doing, okay? Leave and do what? Well, what I think is, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You need to follow me. See, grace, right? For everybody, always. There's only one perfect person. Truth, hey, there's a better way to live, and you should follow me. So that's Jesus, full of grace and truth. Now, I have a bunch of random thoughts, so stick with me here. My first Sunday here back in 2018, I talked about this same story. I thought that's going to be the way I want to start here. And at some point towards the end of that message, I asked two simple questions. What if we could be those people? I mean, what if we could be that place? And so I just want to circle back to it for a few minutes, and I want to ask us again, okay? All of you, no matter where you fall on this spectrum, if you're in the room, if you're watching online, if you lean towards grace, if you lean towards truth, can we just recommit to this journey together again? You know, I've lived here almost 4 years now, and I'm starting to feel like I understand, just a little bit more about our community, like the makeup. I do a lot of research on Facebook too, in case you're wondering. I'm starting to feel like I understand a little bit more about maybe why people in our community resist church, or maybe why they're not interested in Jesus. You know, there's just so many people who have had a really, really terrible experience with church. It might have been growing up, it might have been here. I hope it wasn't here at any time. And some of them have never given it a chance, right? Because they think they know how church is, what it's going to be like and what it's all about. It's that way so much so that what I think we have to do is I think we have to intentionally remind ourselves to be different than that. Like we have to intentionally say, you know, you got to be different than that. I got to keep growing. I have to be different than that. You know, I've talked about this idea before. You know, I grew up in church my whole life. 9 months before I was born, I was at church, in case that makes sense to you. I just grew up in an environment where it was all truth. I knew so much truth. I have 1,000 Bible verses tucked away in my head, didn't always make their way to my heart, if that makes sense to you. I knew all the books of the Bible, probably in order before I could even walk. I had so much truth in my life that I was actually convinced that if I lived that truth so well and nearly perfectly, then I didn't actually need grace. Anybody? And I hate to say it, but for years, I stood in the circle with the group who was pointing fingers at the woman. And I didn't realize how much I needed to be standing next to Jesus. I'm so bad at this. You can ask my wife. Let's bring her up here. I'm so bad at giving grace to other people because I didn't think I needed it. And some of you understand this. Just be good, walk straight, right? Avoid the majors, okay? That's easy. It's like this badge of honor that you don't actually need to fall on grace. There is this really dangerous idea that Jesus is lucky to have me on his team. I'm such a good person. And then one day, okay, you finally realize the only thing that will get you through a mess that you've actually caused is grace. And when somebody down here, that one, that's difficult to figure out how that works. But when someone down here, right, a spouse, a parent, a boss actually says, man, I could do this and you deserve this, but they go, you know what, I'm actually going to be gracious in this situation. When you can actually start to connect the dots to what you've received from them, you can start to make more sense on what you received and need from God. And then remind yourself, okay, I have received this, I should pass it on. So several years ago, I was like, you know, I suck so much at this right here. I need a permanent reminder in my life of what I need so I can pass it on. Just for me, I put grace right there on my wrist. So I could be reminded, you are terrible at this. Okay, you should be gracious. And maybe I've been pulled over before, and I do place my license in this hand so it can be read when I hand it over to the officer. But that wasn't the original intent, okay? It was this: God, help me to see my need for your grace. God, help me to hand this out freely to other people. And this is where you all come in on it. God, help me to be able to teach and lead other people to be able to offer grace as well. So this is an all play, and I'm going to try to hit everybody. Just see if you can stick here with me. If you are unsure, if you are undecided about Jesus because you never knew that this Jesus existed, if you're not sure what you think because you grew up in a church with a different version of Jesus than this one, if your version of Jesus actually includes that God doesn't love you, he actually hates you, and Jesus is just waiting for you to mess up so he can rub your face in it, if you're new to this church and your experience has been that the sign out front of other places says everybody is welcome, but when you got inside the doors you had an entirely different experience, If your idea of Jesus is that he loves everybody and never judges, because that's his most quoted words, don't judge, or, listen, if you've been a follower of Jesus for years and even part of this church for years, and yet there's a lot of space between when you needed grace and where you are today, I want to continue to invite us in on the journey to be people and to be a church who are doing our best to live full of grace and truth. So, we're not going to be the bullhorn guy that stands out on the corner and points out everybody's mistakes and says that you're all going to hell. We're not going to be the stone-throwing church. We're going to be the church that says grace welcomes sincere seekers. And yet, don't formulate your email yet. Also, I know that we all come in here every week and we're all carrying things and we're totally off track in our lives. And God would say, and we should actually say to one another, hey, I love you, but we need to talk. That your life is not going to be what you want, right? It's not going to be what you need. It's not going to be all it can actually be. If you don't stop this, there's a better way. So grace, right? We're going to love people and accept people. We're going to remember that we don't have it all figured out, that everybody's welcome, nobody's perfect, and anything's possible. If God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, then he probably doesn't need us to do it either. And there are ways that seem right to you but actually take you down wrong paths. God is true. The truth will set you free, and we're not going to waver on that. Now, I hope that we are becoming, so gracious that the only thing that's going to cause difficulty for someone would be the truth. And here's what I mean by that, and I'll try to land it here. We do as much as possible around here, we do a pretty good job at trying to remove as much religious baggage as we can, preconceived notions of what Christians are like, things that are religious but they're not actually in the Bible. And so we try to do our best, to give you a parking spot, to have decent coffee, right, to take care of your kids, to hand out donuts if you come early enough and sit in the donut zone. And listen, I think I should clarify this for a second because some of you are wondering why I've never offered you a donut. And you're like, what's donuts? Then you need to come earlier. But I give donuts to people that sit in these two sections right here in the first 4 rows. I'm just trying to entice you to get closer. That's all. You're like, well, I've never got a donut. Now you know. But we're going to do our best, right, to try to connect through music. What we're doing, don't miss this, is we're removing obstacles all so that someone can actually come in here and hear the truth that God loves you. You could actually have a relationship with him, but please don't miss this. We're going to keep trying to remove every obstacle we possibly can except one, and that's Jesus. All kinds of people come through our doors. Some of you came today for the first time. I'm glad that you're here. I think you should be here. We've had more than 400 people come through these doors this year alone just for the very first time to check something out. And for the most part, people like it, right? It's different than the way we grew up, the environment, whatever that is. But there are some people, and it might be some of you, or it will be some of you, that cannot get past some of the things that Jesus said and taught about himself and what it really means for us. Because let's be honest, right? Jesus as the only way to God, like Jesus as the ruler of my life, his word as final authority for my life, that can be a little offensive for a lot of us. So in case I'm not clear, we're not going to beat people up who don't live like we do, act like we do, or aren't Christian enough. Guess what? This is a place for broken people. You know what broken people do? They break things. We're going to say we love you because we have been loved, and when maybe somebody knows that they're loved, they might pay attention to what's true. So, neither are we saying, again, save it, I'm not done yet. Neither are we saying that this is all inclusive and it's all affirming and it doesn't matter what you believe. Because if after we've showered someone with love and acceptance and grace, someone decides to walk away or actually decides to pursue something else besides the real Jesus, it won't be because of us. It's because they're not ready for what he offers or not actually ready for it yet. So we're growing in this way. I love it, but we still have a ways to go. I have a whole lot more to learn. As a church, could we just keep going after the model of Jesus? Full of grace and truth. But here's a caution, I'll give it to you. When you say that you're going to do both, that we're going to be in this church that tries to be as gracious as we can and as truthful as we can, a lot of times what happens is you take shots from both sides. Meaning, and you might send me something this week, that's fine. Because I wasn't clear, or you weren't listening, or you're not sure I mean what I say. And it goes like this: hey, you're too accepting, or you tell too much truth. Oh, you water down the message, the doors are too wide open, or you're too direct and you ask me to make too many changes. You take Jesus too literally. I think all of those are shots worth taking, so we're going to keep doing that, okay? I don't know which way you actually lean today, but what if we all just continue to let Jesus teach us how to live this way? Because you imagine, worst case scenario, this would be terrible, but it's possible. When you leave here today and you go out and you try to get through that intersection out there where there should be a stoplight in front of Walmart, and you're in an accident and you're broken and bleeding and you end up in the ER. Can you imagine walking into the ER, into the waiting room, and the first response is, you're bleeding all over the waiting room. What are you doing? You're like, this is where people go when they're injured. Can you imagine if somebody said, hey, go home, clean it up a little bit, and then come back and we'll take care of you? That's the experience a lot of people have had. And so what if we said, you know what, come on in here. Now just sit down, we're gonna take care of you, and after we kind of love you back to health, then we're gonna show you what the next steps are for you to take to get towards healing, okay? So listen, you came in today and you needed grace, okay? And you would say, well, that sounds like me, like I'm broken and I'm bleeding and I'm injured and I'm hurting. But you might say, okay, if Jesus is like that, then give me Jesus. Right? Grace welcomes sincere seekers. Jesus, by the way, never hurt an already hurting person. Never read that. But it is this: he loves you, he welcomes you, and maybe what you also don't know yet is what you really need is some truth to go with it. Right? Without truth and change, you always end up back in the same place, right? Acceptance, right, is not going to be enough for you if you don't change how you're living. And you can have that today, right? For the rest of us, right, hey, we're trying to learn to be like Jesus. Listen, I think it's possible. We can be these people and we can be this church that's full of grace and truth. So we're going to sing. They're going to sing. She learned in the first service. Don't stand back there. We're going to sing. I would invite you to participate in that here in a second. But there might be a number of next steps for you. And it might be today that you go, man, I never knew that Jesus would like that. That he could accept anyone as they are. And it is the graciousness of Jesus that teaches you how to live better. Like, you could do that today. You just offer up a prayer in this final song. If you have heard that before and you're like, you know what, I need to go all in on this. This water is warm. You could be baptized today and indicate a life change. If you're in the room, just go back to the back corner. Dan back there would love to walk you through that. We could do that today. But it might be that you just pray, you ask God to speak something to you today. We're going to respond with this song. If you're a follower of Jesus, you might choose to take communion. That's in the back of the chair in front of you. As a reminder, right, of the grace that you have received to be the motivation to give grace to other people. So God, today we say thank you for these words. God, thank you for this model of Jesus who so well shows us that grace and truth can coexist. So God, today as we just have these few minutes that we would receive something from you today, and God, we would maybe even for the first time ever respond to your grace, to ask you to forgive us, to ask you to come inside of our life, to make us new, teach us what it looks like to live and follow you. God, just as a church, I pray that we just always are taking steps to be this kind of place that welcomes people who are seeking, that can be honest about what it looks like to follow you. So God, today we say thank you that you show us what it's like to be full of grace and truth. And we pray this through Jesus. Amen.
Show us your glory. Show us your glory. In wonder and surrender we fall down. Show us your glory. Show us your glory. Let every burning heart be holy ground. Holy ground.
We wanted to end today just to be able to give ourselves a few minutes to kind of let these truths kind of settle in over us. And I pray that God's been speaking to you in the last couple of minutes. Hey, if you're in the room and you want somebody to pray with you today, there's always somebody standing back there in the corner under the big banner that says prayer. They would love to be able to do that with you today. If you came ready to practice generosity, and so many of you do this online, and that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. But if you're in the room and you want to do that, you can leave that with the ushers as you go out the doors today. Hey, if you're our guest today, thanks so much for being with us. I hope you had a good morning, and would love the opportunity to connect with you if you would like to do that. We have a little thing down the hall to the right called 10 After. There's some awesome people down there who would love to meet you and maybe just point you to some next steps. Specifically today, we actually have a thing called VIP lunch, which is happening after this service about 12:30. If you are our guest today, you're welcome to come to that as well. Or if you've been with us for the last couple of weeks or even months and you've never come to lunch, we'd love to invite you to come to VIP lunch. And that's less than an hour, and we'll feed you, and you just get to sit with some of our staff. So that's happening today. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next week.